Hi, seniors. Miss you guys. Chapter 10 notes. I know you have the audio notes on GarageBand, but I'm going to try something new. So we'll see how this goes. Anyway, I'm going to go through the whole chapter so you can kind of start and stop whatever you want to do. But I wanted to explain some things because there are a few items that are a little bit outdated because of the old textbook that's being used, but just kind of the basics. And this is pretty much. Oops, let me grab my glasses. I'll be back. This is pretty much it, you guys. Your senior portfolio, I want to explain that to you real quick. Senior portfolio, due to the circumstances that we're in, community service, of course, has been totally waived. So I don't need any community service. I'm not even looking at community service. Basically, it's an 80-point assignment. It will be the last assignment. It's due April 30th. In order to get credit, you have to have either letters back will count, whether that be political letters back, consumer letters back, job application, if you register with Selective Service, if you register to vote, if you attended a school board meeting, choose 4 of those things. So, for example, let's say you got a letter back from Eric Paterka, you got a letter back from Janet Lannis, you registered with Selective Service, and you attended a school board meeting. You're just going to send those to me, either take a picture and send them, or copy and paste, whatever you need to do to get those to me. Excuse me. To get those to me, and it's 20 points an item. All right. So if that does not make sense, please email me. We can set up a Zoom meeting. You can call me. But that is what the senior portfolio is going to look like. Unfortunately, because of the circumstances that we're in. So that will be the last grade. This will be the last chapter. So that's kind of where we're at. Anyway, okay, here we go. Chapter 10, Congress. Section, I'm going to go through, it's not a terribly long chapter, so I'll kind of go through everything, the basics that you need to know, I feel like you need to know. Section 1, the national legislature. So we just got done with the unicameral. We are unique in Nebraska because we are unicameral. We're the only unicameral in the nation. We have a one-house legislature. So we kind of went through that, how a bill becomes law at the state level, our leadership at the state level. Now we're going to go to the federal government, Washington, D.C. The national legislature, that is Congress. That is the House. That is the Senate. We have 100 members that make up the House, 100 members that make up the Senate, 435 members that make up the House, so 535 members that make up Congress. That is our legislative branch. What do? They make laws. James Madison, the father of the Constitution of the United States, called Congress the first branch of the national government. Remember, we have 3 branches: executive branch, judicial branch, and legislative branch. So this chapter is just on the legislative branch. Bicameral Congress, bicameral 2-house legislature. At the federal level, we are bicameral. Bi like bicycle, 2 wheels, bicameral 2 houses, the House and the Senate, bicameral Congress. Constitution establishes a bicameral legislature, 2 houses. It does this for 3 reasons. And I think most of you guys that turned your assignment, most of you that turned your assignment into me got these right. So historical reason why we have a bicameral legislature, Congress, is based on the British. We copied from the British. We use a lot of what we have in America. We got a lot of what we have today from the British. So the British Parliament had consisted of 2 houses up until the 1300s. All 49 of the 50 states are bicameral with the exception of Nebraska. We are unicameral, and we get along pretty darn good. But the other 49 states are bicameral. Practical, the framers had to create a 2-chambered body to settle the conflict between the Virginia and New Jersey plan. So going back to chapters 1, chapter 2, and chapter 3, clear back to the beginning of the school year, Virginia plan is a large state plan. New Jersey New Jersey plan is a small state plan. Virginia is based on population. That's how we get the House of Representatives. New Jersey is based on equal representation. That is how we get the Senate. So the Great Compromise is a combination of Virginia plan and New Jersey plan. So practical, it's going to settle that issue. Theoretical is the checks and balances. The framers favored a bicameral Congress in order that one house, I should say, might act to check the other. So checks and balances. No one branch is more powerful than the other, and then the checks and balances in regards to the Senate and the House. The framers saw bicameralism as a way to diffuse the power of Congress and so prevent it from overwhelming the other two branches of government. All right, term and sessions. Few people had some struggles on the worksheet in regards to term. It's kind of confusing how it's being used here. Ever since 1789, remember the Constitution was written in 87. Constitution was ratified in 1789. We're now a new nation, a new government. Congress has met for 2-year terms. So a term of Congress is, the definition of term is the length of time between congressional elections. A term in Congress is every 2 years. So what that means is every 2 years we have an election. So in 2020, we are having an election. And so we'll be voting for House members, for senators, and this will actually be an on-year election, which involves voting for the president of the United States. But a term, the definition of term is the length of time between congressional elections. A term in Congress is 2 years, and each term is numbered consecutively. Congress began its first term March 4th, 1789. That will be changed later to January through a constitutional amendment, and that term ended 2 years later, March 4th, 1791. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, you guys. 20th Amendment to the United States Constitution, that was passed during FDR's administration in 1933. And that's what I was just talking about. That's where the date for the start of each term will be on noon of the third day of January every odd numbered year. So now instead of having the term start from March to March, it goes from January to January. It's odd numbered years. So noon on the third day of January every odd numbered years. Elections are even numbered years, but term starts odd numbered years. The 108th, and your book's outdated, so just know that this stat is from the old book. 108th Congress began January 3rd, 2003, and it will end at noon January 3rd, 2005. So that's how that works. Sessions of Congress. Sessions of Congress is that period of time during which each year Congress assembles and conducts business. So there are 2 sessions in a term. So a session is 1 year. A term is the length of time between congressional elections. A term is 2 years in regards to Congress. Congress assembles and conducts business. So 2 sessions, that's when they're actually working. There are 2 sessions to each term of Congress, 1 session each year. Adjourning. Adjourn means to suspend until the next session. So let's say I'm in the House of Representatives, I'm done with all my business. I want to adjourn till the next start of the next session, which is in January. Can I do that with the consent of the Senate? So the House and the Senate have to agree on the date of adjournment. Until World War II, a typical session lasted 4 or 5 months. So understanding from 1787 or 1789 up until 1939, about the start of World War II, a typical session was 4 or 5 months. Today they meet year round. They're pretty much there 12 months. Today, however, the many pressing issues facing Congress force it to remain in session through most of the year. So they are there pretty much, in the old days they were there 4 or 5 months and then they go back home and work. That's not the case really since 1940s. Sine die means the ending of a session, when the session will end. Neither house may adjourn sine die without consent of the other. So let's say the House is, hey, we're done, we got all our business done, and the Senate says, well, we're not done. The House can say, well, I don't care, I'm done, I'm gonna sine die, I'm gonna adjourn. They can't. They have to do it at the same time. They have to both agree on that. Neither house may adjourn sine die without the consent of the other. Now, what if they get in a battle over that? There's a procedure that current President Trump could do. It's called prorogue. Prorogue is in the United States Constitution. It gives the president the power to end or discontinue a session if they can't agree. It's never been used in the history of the United States. So the Constitution does give the president the power to prorogue and to continue a session, but only when the two houses cannot agree on a date for adjournment. It's never happened. So no president has ever used that power, but if it were to happen, it is in the Constitution they can do that. Special sessions. Special sessions are can only be called by the president. So only the president of the United States can call a special session. They may call Congress into special session. A special session is a meeting to deal with some emergency situation. Now, going back historically, right? Going back prior to World War II, they were only in Washington for 5 months. So it was possible that they would be back in their home state of Nebraska, and we'd have to call them back to Washington for a special session. Today, special sessions are rare because Congress is pretty much there year-round. 26. There have only been 26 special sessions of Congress that have ever been held, meaning the House and the Senate both coming back together for a special session. President Harry S. Truman called the most recent one. That was in 1948. That would have been at the right after World War II, and that was to deal with anti-inflation and welfare measures after World War or after the aftermath of World War II. The Senate has been called into special session alone 46 times. And I don't know how up to date that is. I'd have to look that up, you guys. But we haven't been called into a special session very often. We'd have to look that up. It might be a little higher than that now. But to consider treaties, presidential appointments. But according to your textbook, they have not called one since 1933. So can the House call a special session? Can the Senate call a special session alone? Yes. It's just not common today. The House has never called one alone. And I think that still holds true today in 2020. But you can look that up and see. But special sessions just are not very common in the federal government in Washington, D.C. All right, Section 2. Section 2 is just going to go through the House, and Section 3 is going to go through the Senate. House representatives, our guys in Nebraska. Adrian Smith, he represents the 3rd Congressional District. He's our guy. Adrian Smith, he will be up for re-election here in November. The primary is coming up here in May, but he's not on the primary ballot. So the special election, the House for Nebraska is Adrian Smith for the 3rd Congressional District. I believe the other one is Bacon. I don't know, you guys look him up. Not Roger Bacon. It might be Roger. Bacon's the guy's last name. And then I think Jeff Fortenberry is the other guy. So Nebraska has 3 House representatives. They serve a 2-year term. And when we vote in Nebraska, we vote based on our district. So we can only vote for the 3rd Congressional District. I can't vote for the 1st and 2nd Congressional District. Okay, so the House. Size and terms. There's 435 members. Is not fixed by the Constitution, rather it's set by Congress. So did we start at 435? No, we did not. We started with a much lower number. We kept growing. Can we change that? Can it go beyond 435 members? Yes. Will we? No, probably. Term of a House member is 2 years. So see, then there's kind of confusion between term. Term is the length of time between congressional elections. A term of Congress is 2 years. But what is a term for a House of Representative? A House of Representatives term is 2 years. Apportion means distributed among the states on the basis of their respective populations. So what they do in the state of Nebraska is they take the population of the state of Nebraska, which is about 1.7 million, and they divide it up. And based on that, each House member in Nebraska represents about the same number of people. So Adrian Smith is representing about the same number of people as is Jeff Fortenberry. And so if you look at Adrian Smith, he basically represents from Grand Island all the way west to the border. And then Jeff Fortenberry and Bacon, they represent kind of the Omaha-Lincoln area. But it's based on population. Each state is guaranteed at least one seat. So what if you're a tiny, tiny state like Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, and you don't have very many people? You are guaranteed one seat. You can't be so small that you don't get at least one seat in the House. So there are currently 7 states that have a population that's so low that they only have one House of Representative in Washington, D.C. And those states are listed there: Alaska, Delaware, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, and Wyoming. Nebraska, we have 3 based on our population. The District of Columbia, which is Washington, D.C., Guam, Virgin Islands, and American Samoa, each elect a delegate. So there's delegates that are represented in the House. Puerto Rico chooses, instead of calling there's a delegate, they call it a resident commissioner. Interesting, they have a say, but they're not a full-fledged member of the House. So it's important to mention, because Puerto Rico at one time was talking about becoming a U.S. state. They missed it by 3 votes. If Puerto Rico were to become a state, they would get 2 senators and they would get representation in the House. Currently, because they are not a state, they have delegates or resident commissioner, but they don't have as much power as do House members. Choose representatives every 2 years. So every 2 years, Adrian Smith is up for re-election, or the newbies are up for election every 2 years. So Adrian Smith every 2 years is up on the ballot if he's going to continue to run. There's no constitutional limit on the number of terms any member of Congress may serve. So in Washington, Adrian Smith could get elected 15 times and serve 30 years. There are no term limits on House members in Washington. There are term limits at the state level at our state unicameral. Ernie Chambers, for example, he can serve 2 terms and then he has to sit out 4 years, and then he can serve 2 terms and then he has to sit out 4 years. Okay? At the state level there is, and in Washington, D.C., in the House, there are no term limits. There are term limits for the president. There's term limits at the state level for us, but not in Washington for the House or the Senate. Reapportion means to redistribute. So we are getting ready for the 2020 census. Some of you probably got your paperwork in the mail, or got a note to say, I'll go online. I actually went online and did ours. The census is basically a population count. Why are we spending billions and millions of dollars to have a census? We do that because of taxation. We do that because of representation in the House. We do that for a lot of reasons. So every 10 years we have a census. The first census was in 1790, and we'll have the next one here currently in 2020. It takes them 2 or 3 years to get things figured out. But based on that, they will have to redistrict. They may have to reapportion the seats. So if Western Nebraska is getting fewer and fewer people, Adrian Smith may get his Grand Island to the border district moved to, to York. I mean, it's possible. Or the state could lose so many people that we may go from 3 representatives to 2 representatives. So the seats in the House after each decennial census every 10 years, they will basically look at those numbers and they'll redraw the districts. Or people can gain or lose House members. Let's say we lose 700,000 Nebraskans, and California picks up 700,000 people. They may go from 53 representatives to 55 representatives. We may go from 3 representatives to 2 representatives. The first House of Representatives in the United States had 65 seats. In 1792, had 106 seats, and it has continued to grow. A growing nation, it went to, and then it just shows you statistically, 142 in 1800, 180 seats in 1810. By 1912, around World War I, there's 435 seats. So we have been at 435 seats in the House since prior to World War I, since 1912. Woodrow Wilson would have been president. The House has long since grown too large for effective floor action. So then the issue is, could we go to 500, 600, 700, 800 representatives? We could, but it's pretty hard to get much done. So the Reapportionment Act of 1929 basically set up what is called the automatic reapportionment. And basically it says that we will not get any bigger than 435 members of the House. Now, Congress could change that, but I doubt they will. So the permanent size of the House is 435 members. So today, each of the 435 seats in the House of Representatives average, and this number is going to be a little higher than that, but on average, I would say probably closer to 65 to 80,000 persons is approximately how many people are being represented by House members. So if you look at Adrian Smith, how many people is he approximately representing? He's probably representing close to 80,000 people today. Your book says 65,000, but remember your book's a little old. Census Bureau. So who does all the work after the 2020 census? Who will do a lot of the footwork? It's that group is called the Census Bureau. They'll determine the number of seats each state should have. So they look at all the statistics from the census, and based on that, then they'll look at what states, how the districts are going to be drawn, if states are going to lose seats, gain seats. When the Bureau's plan is ready, they will send it to the president. So the Census Bureau will send their 2020 plan, assuming if President Trump is reelected, or if he's not reelected, whoever the president is, they will send that plan to the president. The president then will send it to Congress. President really can't do anything about it. He can't manipulate the Census Bureau's findings. He can't manipulate the seats. They make that decision. Within 60 days of receiving it, once the president sends it to Congress, the president looks at it, sends it to Congress, to the House, and to the Senate. Once he looks at it, if they don't reject it, it becomes effective. Who knows today with all the congressional bickering, if that would be a partisan issue, I don't know. But it would go to Congress, and within 60 days. Typically, it just goes, it's formality. But like I said, with today's climate, who knows? Congressional elections. So when do we have congressional elections? When will we vote for Adrian Smith and Ben Sasse? By the way, Ben Sasse is up this year. The day congressional elections are held on the same day in every state. Elections are held on Tuesday, following the first Monday in November of each even-numbered year. I don't remember I was grading somebody's paper, and you forgot to mention even-numbered year. So the elections are held in the Tuesday following the first Monday in November, which will be, I don't know, I'm just guessing, November 7th, maybe. November 7th, 2020. It takes them a few months to get things figured out. It won't take them a few months to find out who wins, but there's like a 3-month transition, and then they will start their new congressional term, odd number year, 2021. Congress has made an exception for Alaska, which holds its election in October. And I think that's based just on the sun and that kind of thing. Off-year elections, those congressional elections that occur in non-presidential years. Now, same thing on the worksheet. I noticed a few people missed this. Off-year elections are when you're not voting for a president. On-year elections are when you're voting for a president. Voter turnout tends to be better during on-year elections. 2020 is an on-year election. 2022 is an off-year election. 2024 is on-year election. Okay? Between presidential elections are often are called off-year elections. So, and like I said, your book's a little outdated. Just know that 2020 is on-year. 2022 is off-year. Voter turnout is going to be better in 2020, maybe, given the circumstances of the COVID-19, versus 2022, which is off-year. And if you're seniors, if you're registered to vote, currently registered to vote, you should be able to vote in the primary. The primary will be coming up here in May. So kind of pay attention to that. Polls are open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And if you live in Sutherland, it's at the Methodist Church. Districts. So if you have 435 members that make up the House of Representatives, how many districts? 435 districts. So go back to unicameral, right? State of Nebraska, we have 49 senators in the state of Nebraska. At the state level, we have 49 districts. In Washington, D.C., we have 435 members that make up the House. How many districts? 435 districts. So 435 members of the House are chosen by voters in 435 separate congressional districts across the country. Constitution makes no mention of congressional districts. So nowhere in the U.S. Constitution does it say that we have to have districts. It's just how we've done things. Single member district, the voters in each district elect one of the state's representatives from among a field of candidates running for a seat in the House from that district. So Sutherland, Nebraska, we are in the 3rd Congressional District. You guys vote as a single member district. I vote as a single member district. I can only vote in the 3rd District. I can't go vote for the 1st District or the 2nd District. I can't go vote for Jeff Fortenberry or Bacon. Okay? So House of Representatives are voted most, other than the 7 states that only have 1 representative. 43 of the states are single. You will vote for the House member in a single member district. At large is where the whole state rather than a district votes. Every voter could vote for a candidate for each one of the state's seats in the House. So if you look at the 7 states that only have 1 House member, the whole state gets to vote. Now, if we didn't have single member districts, would it be fair that I could go vote for the representative for the 1st District or the representative from the 2nd District? Would it be fair that Omaha people vote for us in the 3rd District? No. So at-large elections are not fair. That is why 43 of the states have single-member districts, and that's how you vote. The 7 states that are at large, that's just because they have 1 House member. So understand, I don't want to vote. People in Omaha don't want me voting for their issues or their person, and I wouldn't want people in Omaha voting for our person out here in the 3rd District because we're rural. They don't know what's going on, and we maybe don't know what's going on in the cities. Congress did away with general ticket system in 1842. All the states in the House were to be filled from single-member districts in each state. So our elections are filled by single-member districts for the House representatives today. 7 states have 1 vote. They're considered at large just because they have only 1 representative. Hopefully that makes sense. I don't know. 1932, Wood versus Broom. That is a court case dealing with congressional districts. And that was a court case during the Dirty 30s, 1930s under FDR. Gerrymandered congressional districts have been drawn to the advantage of political parties that control the state's legislature. So gerrymandering is like cheating. I'm drawing, it's like you have a bunch of people standing out on the football field and I'm drawing my lines to try to include, people that I know they're going to help me win, or people that I know that are like-minded. So districts drawn to the advantage of the Republican Party, districts drawn to the advantage of the Democratic Party. Gerrymandering goes on. It still goes on today, even though it's not fair. Gerrymandering is widespread today, and not just at congressional district level. So it's not just at the congressional level. It might be at the, it might be at the state level as well, even maybe local level. Districts for the election of state legislators are regularly drawn for partisan advantage. You look at the state of Nebraska. Nebraska's pretty much a Republican state, except for the area of Omaha that Ernie Chambers represents, the 11th district. That's Democratic. But if you look, typically when the state casts its electoral votes from the House, it's Republican. And so there's an advantage there. Most often, gerrymandering takes 1 or 2 forms. So how can you do it to give yourself an advantage? You can concentrate the opposition's voters in 1 or a few districts, thus leaving the other districts comfortably safe for the dominant party. Or you could spread your opposition so thinly as possible among several districts that there's no way that they're going to win. They're not going to get enough votes, limiting the opposition's ability to win anywhere in the region. And so it goes on. Westbury versus, that should should say versus Sanders. That was a 1964 case. The court held that the population difference among Georgia's congressional districts were so great that it violated the Constitution. So that law basically said, yes, there's some shenanigans going on, and it was definitely not fair. And the Constitution shows that it's not fair. The importance of the Westbury case and the court's later one person, one vote decision cannot be overstated. So the issue is, does my vote matter? And individuals want to feel like their vote matters. And so the Westbury case basically saying my vote doesn't matter. Gerrymandering based solely on race is a violation of the 15th Amendment. There's a case, Gamillion versus Lightfoot, that was a 1960 case dealing with gerrymandering in regards to Native Americans and the Native American vote. 15th Amendment, definitely a violation of their rights. And there's even cases when I was going through college where that was still happening in Montana, where they were trying to rig Native Americans from being elected into government positions up in that state. Last thing here, qualifications for House members to be in the House. You have to be 25 years of age, you have to be a 7-year citizen of the United States, and you must be an inhabitant of the state. And unofficially, you should be an inhabitant of the district that you're elected. And typically the guideline there is a year. So Adrian Smith needs to be a Nebraskan for at least a year, and we also hope that he's a member of the district for at least a year. So could I move from here to South Dakota, live in South Dakota a year, and then run for the House? Yes. As long as I'm a 7-year American, I'm 25 years of age, and I've been there for a year. Long-standing custom, not the Constitution, also requires that a representative must live in the district. So nowhere in the Constitution does it say you have to live in the district, but pretty much now it's a given. I don't want, well, a good example would be Tom Osborne. Tom Osborne's a Lincoln guy, right? He lives in Lincoln. He wants to run for the House of Representatives, the 3rd Congressional District. He doesn't live in the 3rd Congressional District, but he owns a cabin at Lake McConaughey, right? So he established his residency at Lake McConaughey. He shows that he's lived there, or he's receiving mail at his residence at Lake McConaughey for a year. So then he runs for the 3rd Congressional District, and he wins. So at one time, Tom Osborne was our House of Representatives, was our representative in Washington. Okay? Major differences between the House and the Senate. The Constitution makes the House the judge of elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. So Tom Osborne is selected to be in the House. The members of the House, the 435 members of the House, they're the ones that look. They look at the elections, they look at the returns, they look at the qualifications. Does he qualify to be in the House? The House may refuse to seat a member elected by a majority vote. So let's say Tom Osborne is elected by Nebraskans to be in the 3rd Congressional District House of Representatives. Can the House of Representatives say, no, we don't want you? Yes, but it has to be a majority vote, which is, I believe, 218 would have to say, no, we're not going to seat him. Very uncommon. It may also punish its members for disorderly behavior by a majority vote, but with concurrence of, that should say, 2/3 to expel. So can they slap him on the wrist saying, no, we don't like what you did. We're going to let you come in. We're going to seat you. We're not going to refuse you a seat. We're going to give you a seat, but we also don't like your behavior. They can do that by majority vote, which is 218 members. Or let's say they don't like the behavior at all. They want to, and he's already in the House. Can they kick him out? Yes, 2/3 vote. So 2/3 of 435, whatever that is. In 1900, Brigham H. Roberts of Utah, he was refused a seat because he was a polygamist, and polygamy is against the law in the United States. Over more than 200 years, the House has expelled. Now this number's gone up a little bit. We'd have to look it up, you guys. But over 200 years, the House has expelled only 5 members. It's not very common. So in the House, only 5 members have been kicked out, 2/3 vote, up until your book was written, 2004, 2002. 3 were kicked out in 1861. And of course, those 3 were involved with the succession of succeeding from the Union during the Civil War. and one was kicked out in 1980, and that guy's name was Michael Myers, and he was kicked out for corruption. And then in 2002, James was kicked out for bribery, fraud, and tax evasion. Just not very common to be expelled, and it does take 2/3 vote. Informal qualifications, party identification, name familiarity, gender, ethnic characteristics, political experience. So not only do you have to be 25 years of age and an American citizen for 7 years and live in the state for a year and unofficially live in the district for a year, but party's going to play a factor. You look at Nebraska, tends to be a Republican state. Name familiarity, Tom Osborne, pretty easy to get elected. Everybody knows Tom. So political experience, all that kind of stuff. All right, we're good there. Last section. Last section's on the Senate. You guys haven't been assigned this yet. I think this is the last section. The Senate, 100 members, right? We get the Senate because of the New Jersey plan. The Senate has 100 members, 2 from each state. Nearly a third of the present members of the Senate once served in the House. So if you look at Ben Sasse, you look at Deb Fischer. I don't think either of them served in the House of Representatives, but if you look at the 100 members currently today, there's probably been a few of them that at one time were House members. Senators and House members make the same wages, but to be a senator, the qualifications are higher, and senators serve 6 years instead of 2 years, but they do get paid the same. Size, elections, and terms. Size, the Constitution says that the Senate shall be composed of 2 senators from each state. So no matter if you're a big state, small state, everybody gets 2. Our 2 senators are Ben Sasse and Deb Fischer, and Ben Sasse is up for re-election in November 2020. Senate is smaller than the House. House is made up of 435 members. Senate is made up of 100. 1789, Senate had 22 members. So going back to the beginning, first ever Senate in the United States had 22 members. In 1791, we had 26 members. Today, because we have 50 states, we have 100 senators. If Puerto Rico were to become a state, we would go from 100 to 102. The framers hoped that the smaller Senate would be a more enlightened and responsible body than the House. The Senate tends to be more prestigious, which is interesting, but they do get paid the same. Senators have a longer term. Senators serve a 6-year term. Senators represent the entire state. So if you look at Deb Fischer and Ben Sasse, they're representing the entire state of Nebraska, 1.7 million people. If you look at Adrian Smith, Jeff Fortenberry, and Mr. Bacon, those 3 individuals are representing a district of about 80,000 people. House members serve 2 years, senators serve 6 years. 17th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which was passed right before World War I in 1913 under Woodrow Wilson. Senators have been picked by the voters in each state. So prior to 1913, who selected Ben Sasse and Deb Fischer? Who selected our senators? They were chosen by our state legislature. So, and at that time in Nebraska, we were bicameral. We had 133 members. So going back prior to 1913, 133 Nebraska state senators at the state level chose our senator in Washington, D.C. 1913 to present, we vote. We, the people, vote for our state senators. Only 1 senator is elected from a state in any given election. So we would never have Ben Sasse and Deb Fischer up at the same time unless there were a death or a resignation or expulsion. So this, in 2020, it'll just be Ben Sasse that's up. The 17th Amendment gives each state a choice of method for filling a vacancy. So the 17th Amendment not only says that that we the people choose our state senator in Washington, D.C., and that it's not our state legislators that are doing it, but it also states what happens if Ben Sasse were to die in office. What would happen? So how do we do that? So this is what we can do. We can fill the seat at a special election called by the governor. So if Ben Sasse were to die in office, Governor Pete Ricketts could call a special election for us to vote for his replacement. Or The governor, Pete Ricketts, could appoint someone to serve until voters filled the vacancy at a special election or the next regular election. So if something were to happen to Ben today, that's a bad example. Let's say Deb Fisher. Something were to happen to Deb Fisher today, most likely the governor would appoint somebody until the next election in 2022, would be most common. But those are the two choices that they would have. A good example I'd have is Sonny Bono. I don't know if you guys know Sonny Bono. Sonny Bono was married to Cher. I don't know if you guys know Cher, but Sonny Bono, and they're divorced. But he was a senator, House senator, I believe, in California. He was skiing in the mountains, hit a tree, died. His wife filled his vacancy. She was appointed by the governor, and she ran, basically served until his time was up or his term was up, and then you had the election. So that tends to be more common, where a governor will appoint somebody until the next election. Each senator is elected from the state at large. So when you guys go and vote in the November election in 2020, you'll vote, the whole state will get a vote for or not for Ben Sasse. A term in the Senate is 6 years. Senators' terms are staggered. Only 1/3 of them, 33 or 34 senators, are up on the ballot every 2 years. So this year it's Ben Sasse. In 2022, I believe it'll be Deb Fisher. In 2024, it won't be anybody. And then in 2026, it'll be, so it's every 2 years, and it's a third. The Senate is considered a continuous body. All of its seats are never up for election at the same time, whereas the House could be. I mean, they are, but a lot of times you have people that have already been there coming back. Senators less subject to pressure of public opinion and less susceptible to pleas of special interest groups. So a senator serves 6 years. So let's say I'm Ben Sasse and I make Nebraskans upset in 2021, and I'm serving a 6-year term. I don't really care as much about their opinion. I'm less susceptible to special interest groups or to public opinion, because if I make Nebraskans upset in 2021, by the time I'm up for re-election in 2026, the Nebraskans might have forgot about what I made them mad about. Versus a House member is very much susceptible to public opinion, because they're re-elected every 2 years. So if Adrian Smith were to make Nebraskans mad today, I'll probably remember it by 2024. That makes sense. Constituencies, we are the constituents. We are the constituencies, the people and interests the senator represents. Senators are more visible. We tend to see Ben Sasse and Deb Fisher more than Adrian Smith. In fact, most of you probably have never seen Jeff Fortenberry or Mr. Bacon. Look them up, though, you guys, so you know what they look like. They're the other two representatives in the House. If you don't know what Ben Sasse looks like or Deb Fisher, look them up. But senators tend to be more visible. And then last thing here, qualifications for the Senate. To be a senator, you have to be 30 years of age. You have to be a 9-year citizen of the United States. You have to be from the state you're elected. You have to be a resident of the state from where you're elected for at least a year. Senate judges the qualifications of its members. It may exclude a member by a majority vote. Same thing as the House, right? So let's say a majority vote would be 51. So 51 senators say, we are not going to seat this person who's elected from the state of Nebraska. Can they punish members that are currently in the U.S. Senate that have done something wrong? Yes. Same thing, majority vote, 51. Can they expel? Yes. But that takes a two-thirds vote. So it takes 67 senators to expel a member. I think this is pretty current. You can look it up, you guys. But 15, based on your book, 15 have been expelled from the United States Senate. 1 was expelled in 1797. 14 were expelled during the Civil War time period. And I would assume those 14 were expelled because of seceding from the Union. Most recently, the Senate Ethics Committee had recommended that Senator Bob Packwood a Republican from Oregon, be expelled because of several episodes of sexual harassment. Guys can look him up. He was a scoundrel. He eventually resigned. I think he would have been expelled, but he resigned before that happened. The punishing of a senator for disorderly behavior is also rare. But you can look it up if you want to look up. Your book, I think, goes up to 2004. So if you want to look up who's been expelled from the Senate or the House since 2004 or been reprimanded for misbehavior or not seated, but I would say probably very little change. Okay, last thing then, section 4, and if you notice, these notes are based on your book, so make some corrections, you guys. Members of Congress, 2004, in 2004 was Hagel and Ben Nelson. Today, 2020, who is in there today in, what I got going there? That must be the Senate. So in 2020, it's Ben Sass and Deb Fischer. In the House of Representatives, our representative is Adrian Smith. Personal and political background, Congress 100 from the Senate, 435 from the House. Congress is made up of 535 members. Do they represent a cross-section of American people? No. Women, equal women to men, equal white to black, equal young to old? No. So they are not a representative cross-section. Typically, if you look, and it's getting better, it's getting a lot better, but if you look, it's typically there's still more white males in their 50s in comparison to every other group. It is getting better. You're seeing more and more women making up Congress today. Still tend to see more older people than younger people. Still see a lot of people with wealth versus people that are of average income. There are more women in Congress today than ever. Those stats don't matter so much, you guys. 2002, 63 in the House, 14 in the Senate. That's going to change every 2 years. Nancy Pelosi, that's course of change, right? Nancy Pelosi, she is the House, she is not the House Minority Leader anymore because the Republicans, the Democrats control the House now. She is the Speaker of the House. She is the third in line to the presidency. She makes the same wage as the Vice President of the United States. So Nancy Pelosi, scratch that. She is now the Speaker of the House. At one time, we had 39 blacks, 23 Hispanics, 4 Asians, 2 Native Americans. That was in 2002. We had 1 Asian American, 1 Native Hawaiian in the Senate. All those stats are going to change every 2 years, so it's kind of hard to keep up on that. Nearly all members are married. You tend to see most members of the House and the Senate are married, but divorces are becoming a little more common. Small families tend to see about 2 kids per family. You don't see a lot of large families of members of Congress. Still, Congress, the House and the Senate, most are Protestant in Christian denomination, about 25% Catholic, 8% Jewish. Now we're seeing, other groups, Islam. We're seeing some of Muslim faith. So that's changing. A third of the House and half of the Senate are lawyers. You tend to see a lot of people in government or in politics are lawyers. Nearly all go to college. Almost all of them have degrees, some type of college degree, whether it be an associate degree, bachelor degree, master degree, doctor degree. Oh, so I gotta move my picture here. Congress is not an accurate cross-section of the nation's population. Upper middle class. You and I that are in the trenches, you have to have money to get into politics. And still tends to be more men, white men to women, and typically older. The job members of Congress play 5 major roles. So if you're a House member, if you're Adrian Smith, if you're Deb Fischer, what's your job? Number 1, legislator. Legislator, what do? They make laws. The legislature makes laws. Second, they're to represent their constituents. Ben Sass, Deb Fischer, Adrian Smith are supposed to represent us, Nebraskans. Committee members. If you're in the House, you have to serve on at least 1, possibly 2 committees. If you are in the U.S. Senate, you have to serve on 2 committees, possibly up to 4 committees. So your committee members. You are a servant for your constituents, which just means I'm having trouble navigating getting funds because of the COVID-19, getting funds for my small business that is now closed. I need help. Or to get understanding Obamacare or whatever it may be, I would contact my Adrian Smith, Deb Fisher, Ben Sass to help me navigate, or I could go to the state level too. And then the fifth thing is politicians. They want to get elected. Representatives of the people, elected to represent the people. In broad terms, each lawmaker has 4 voting options. So basically when they vote, so when they're voting on bills that they want to make into laws, they can vote as a trustee, a delegate, a partisan, or a political. I'm a trustee, so if I'm elected to represent the 3rd Congressional District, I'm Adrian Smith, or I'm Deb Fisher, and I'm voting as a trustee, I believe that each question that I face must be decided on its merits. Conscience and independent judgment are my guide. Trustees call issues as they see them, regardless of views held by their constituents. So trustees, I'm going to weigh out the pros and the cons of each situation. I'm going to look at my conscience. That might be a trustee, voting as a trustee may be dealing with issues of death penalty or abortion, or could be other things. Second is delegates. Delegates see themselves as agents of those who elected them. What do the folks back home want? I don't believe in this, but my folks back home want me to vote this way. I'm willing to suppress my view for what the people back home want. Partisans, they felt duty bound to vote in line with the party. Partisans vote, what does the Republican Party want me to vote? What do the Democrats, how they want me to vote? So they vote primarily on the party's leaders, what the party leaders want them to vote. Partisanship is the leading factor influencing their votes on most important measures. If you look at the recent impeachment trials with President Donald Trump, a lot of partisanship there in regards to the vote. Whether you look at the House, eventually issuing articles of impeachment, and then him being tried in the U.S. Senate, which acquitted him on those charges. Political is where you kind of just use elements of all of them. At times you're a trustee, at times you're a delegate, at times you're a partisan. And I would say most politicians probably follow number 4. They're politicos based on the topic. Committee members propose laws or bills. Committee members, bills are referred to committee. Most bills are going to die in committee. Committee members decide which will go to the floor. So most bills won't make it out of committee. And committees, they then determine what's going to make it out onto the floor. Oversight function, which we've been hearing a lot about in the news with President Trump and the recent impeachment trials. Oversight function, the process by which Congress, through its committees, check to see that the various agencies in the executive branch are working effectively and acting in line with the policies that Congress has set by law. Definition. Servants, they act as servants for their constituents, which we kind of already talked about. They help people who have various problems with federal bureaucracy. Maybe I'm having issues getting my Social Security check. Maybe I'm having issues with Obamacare, healthcare. Maybe I'm having issues with the current COVID-19 programs that are out there. Contact your senator, contact your representative. Compensation, this has changed. You guys will have to look this up. Their wage is now closer to $200,000. Compensation, how much do House members get paid? Adrian Smith, how much do senators get paid? Deb Fisher and Ben Sass. 2004, they were making about $158,000. Today, I think it's closer to $200,000. It's like $183,000, $184,000 is the base, and then each committee you're on, you make more, and if you chair a committee, you make more. A few members are paid somewhat more. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, currently $193,600. Her wage is beyond $200,000 now. Vice President and the Speaker make the same, approximately the same. You can look that up. Senate Pro Temp, who's fourth in line to the U.S. presidency. I don't remember his last name, but he's making closer to 200,000 as well. But in 2004, he was making 172,900. You can look that up, you guys. That changes every 2 years in regards to the leadership, and the wages don't change all that much. But majority and minority floor leaders, they make the same as the pro temp. And then some fringe benefits, non-salary compensation. So if I'm a senator, if I'm a House member, I have special tax deductions. I maintain 2 residents, right? I have a residence in Nebraska and I have a residence in Washington. I have travel allowance or expenses. I have small costs for life and health insurance. I have outpatient care by medical staff on Capitol Hill. I have full medical care at low rates at any military hospital, VA hospital. I have a retirement plan. I have a pension plan. I'm covered by Social Security, retirement, Medicare programs. I have several offices. I have an office in Washington. I probably have several offices in Nebraska. I have allowances for offices in my home state and my district. I have funds for hiring a staff and for operating costs related to running those offices. I have franking privileges, which means I can mail letters and other material postage free. Instead, they put what's called a frank, a signature where the stamp would go. I have free printing. I have radio and television tapes that can be produced at very low cost. I can attend gyms, free or low cost, restaurants, Library of Congress, free parking. Free parking is a big deal, you guys, in Washington, because to park a car, to have a permanent parking spot in Washington, D.C. is probably $600 a month. Parking is very expensive. So free parking is a big deal. Politics of pay. There are only 2 real limits on level of congressional pay, presidential veto and voter backlash. So the 27th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which was passed in 1992, says that Congress can give themselves pay raises. They don't do that very often because, number one, voter backlash. Most members are reluctant to vote to raise their salaries because of that. And then membership privileges throw a cloak of legislative immunity, protects members of Congress from suits of libel and slander arising out of their official conduct. So libel is printed words that are used to hurt a person's reputation, and slander is spoken words used to maliciously used to hurt a person's reputation. I'm on a heated debate on the floor of the House or a heated debate on the floor of the Senate, and I say something that's mean. Can they come back and charge me with slander? No. They're protected from that. Protection goes beyond the floor of debate. It also goes to committee. It goes to any type of congressional business. Okay. We're done, guys. Hopefully, just know that the yearbook's 2004, so there's some updates there. Anyway, miss you guys. Hope everything's going well. If you have any questions on your senior portfolio, the final, email me, call me, Zoom me. Bye, guys.